Dr. Rajiv? Sir?
Yes, yeah, good afternoon,
Have you noticed?
everybody. I welcome all the participants to the second session of the day of this FDP program. We have our speaker of the day, Dr. Pravin Solomon, with us. And let me introduce the moderator of today is Dr. Sanjay Kumar. He is a faculty at Department of Microbiology at Maharshi Dayanand University. He basically is a process engineer and works in the production of therapeutic proteins. So now I hand over to Dr. Sanjay for the introduction of the speaker. Dr. Sanjay, please.
Hello. Audible to all of you? Hello. Dr. Rajiv, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are audible, Sanjay.
Okay. A very good afternoon, all of you. And once again, I welcome you to the second session of today's program of this event. And I'm Dr. Sanjay Kumar Kadam from Department of Microbiology. It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Pravin Raja Solomon as the next speaker. Dr. Pravin Raja Solomon is an assistant professor at the Research School of Chemical and Biotechnology, Shastra Deemed University, Tanjavur, Tamil Nadu. He earned his graduation degree in zoology from the American College, Madurai Kamraj University. He got his postgraduate degree in life science from the School of Biological Sciences, Madurai Kamraj University. In 2008, he earned PhD in Life Science from the School of Biological Sciences, Madurai Kamraj University. His PhD research work focused on studies on genomic aberrations and the polymorphism in genetic disorders and cancer. During 2008 and 2011, he worked as a postdoctorate associate in dermatology in Yale University in City, USA. He worked as a scientific director in Awani Life Sciences, Trivandrum, Kerala, India in year of 2012 to 2013. He worked as an assistant professor in NITCO, Silang Engineering College, Sivkasi, Tamil Nadu, India in the year of 2013. He also worked as an assistant professor in Mahasa University, Malaysia in the year of 2013 and 2017. Presently, he is working as an assistant professor in the School of Chemical and Biotechnology, Shastra University, Tamil Nadu. Today he will be speaking on the topic statistics in everyday life, and I will be acting as a moderator for this session. So if you have any query or any doubt, you may write as a private message to me, and you can also ask directly after the end of this talk. If the time will permit, then you can directly ask some questions. So now I would request Dr. Pravin to share the slides and start the talk. Thank you. Dr. Pravin?
Okay, thank you both of you for, thank you, sir. Thank you for both of you, Dr. Rajiv Kumar and Dr. Sanjay Kumar. Okay, so for both of us, for a nice introduction. Okay, let me, so I should click on the presentation thing, right?
Yes, we can see Dr. Pravin. Yes.
Okay, So am I audible to everyone?
Yes, yes, you're audible, sir.
You're on.
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you, sir. Dr. Pravin, you can carry on. The slides are visible and you're perfectly audible, sir.
Dr. Praveen.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Praveen, your slides are visible to us and we can also hear you. You can start with the talk.
Okay. So yeah, but it's still not visible to me here. So okay. Okay. So okay, sorry for this actually. So am I audible to you now?
Yes, yes, we can hear. Yes.
Okay. So I'll try to speak as slow as possible so that everyone can have a glimpse of what we are actually discussing. So we're starting with this day-to-day applications of statistics. When the thing statistics comes into our mind, we are always thinking about mean, median, let's say standard deviation, or confidence interval, or odds ratio, or most of the statistical analysis tools, things like that. But it is not the way actually. We always see statistics all around us. It is present in our day-to-day life. It is actually inbuilt in us. Everywhere we look, every moment in our life, we are actually seeing into the statistical aspects actually. So for some people, this may be more interesting. For some people, this may be very basic. For some, it may be a little bit on the other side. But whatever it may be, I'll go through the basic things actually. So statistics is a grammar of science. Some of the course we'll see actually. And second is, if your experiment needs statistics, you ought to have done a better experiment. So, and third is like math is a language that you use to describe statistics, but really it's about collecting information and putting it in an order that makes sense. So you can see the importance of statistics with some of the quotes being displayed by some of the famous people. Okay, so coming to the domain of statistics, actually, mostly if you look at the statistics aspect, we are using these statistics mostly in the spheres of economics, especially for us. Money matters all around. Our life is revolves around money, and our life revolves around health. Two important aspects where we see statistics much largely being used. That doesn't mean it has been neglected otherwise. So we'll see some of the fields actually, how they play a role. Actuarial science, risk in insurance and financial industries, and astrostatistics, understanding of astronomical data and how, they plot the distance between two planetary objects, things like that. Third is like very important is statistics in biology, which is medical statistics. That is the most important part actually among biology. And third is business analytics, business performances and opportunities. And next is chemometrics, measurements on chemical systems. And fourth, very important in a country like India, demography or study of the populations, which is very, very important when you look at the population, demographics of India, the age group, and how they contribute to the economy, and how they play a very important role in day-to-day affairs of the country, all comes into play here. Next is economics, econometrics, statistics and economics. That's another heading. Next is environmental statistics, statistical methods to environmental science. It is another important thing. And very important is epidemiology, factors affecting the health and wellness of population. Currently, the one statistic that matters to most us is the COVID, that is the COVID-19, that is the epidemiological aspect of statistics. How many cases, new cases are coming, how many people are getting cured of that, and day-to-day increase, day-to-day decrease, and the prevalence of the COVID-19 among various populations, various countries, how they're susceptible to that, or how they're resistant to that, how they manage that, how they overcome that. Okay, so they are all coming under epidemiological aspects actually. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so there are some of the important aspects actually. Next is geostatistics, very important, in ocean resources, natural resources, geographical resources. And another very important is machine learning, or the, very important is the artificial intelligence, of course, which is now playing a very, very important role, like the drones, or pilotless aircrafts, pilotless, let's say, surveillance equipments. All those things are now playing a very, very important role. Next is operations research, of course, mathematical modeling. And then next is population ecology, interactions of the various species with the environment, how the various species interact with the environment, things like that. Very important is statistical finance, which is now very, very important for a free market economy like India. How the stock market indexes, the various stock market indexes, your Sensex or your NSE or the NASDAQ, all those things, playing a very, very important role. I mean, they are come under that category actually. Nowadays, very important that is picking up is political science, opinion polls, exit polls. In a country with a big demographics, understanding how the population will vote, how they, how the population reacts to the government's mandate, or the government's, they give some, their programs in and how the general population perceive it and how they are attracted to that, all come under the category of opinion polls and exit polls actually we make actually. And we make opinion polls, exit polls depending upon now in this country, now currently we have a trend of calling of elections. Even before the entire ballots are being counted, we call off elections, like 70% counting, 80% counting, like what currently they are doing in USA actually. So just by 70% votes are counted, you can call off the elections actually. So these things are very, very important. So just with the basics actually, the data types, we'll go quickly with this thing: categorical, numerical. And under the categorical is a nominal and ordinal. The next is under the numerical, it is interval or ratio. Discrete data, things that cannot be measured. Continuous, that can be counted but can be measured. Cannot be counted but can be measured. In interval data, they don't have a true zero around that. Ratio, they do have an absolute zero, one fold, two fold, things like that. Next is the nominal data, frequencies, proportion, percentages. Next is the ordinal data, percentile, median, mode, and then interquartile range. And continuous data, you end up having percentiles, median, interquartile range, mean, mode, standard deviation, and range. So they are some of the data types. Actually, we'll deal with the in our everyday life. Okay, so in everyday life we see those things. Actually, we'll go to the next slide. Actually, so currently you can see very important things. Actually, numerical measures central tendency, of course, very basic things, mode, median, and mean. So they also play a very important role, whether it is your temperature, whether it is your humidity, or whether, you know, when you look at the average rainfall in a place, all those things. Okay, we use other terms, actually, average, mean, things like that. They all come into play in the everyday life. Next slide, please. Okay, next is the variation. So very important. So how, you know, our data varies from the mean, or what is the range of the data, and then what is the characteristics of the deviation. So variance is the average squared deviation from the population mean. The range is the difference between the lowest and the highest. So what range we have. Next is the standard deviation. It is a measure that summarizes the amount by which every value within a data set varies from the mean. How you vary from that. Okay, so square root of variance is the standard deviation. Next, you have the standard error. You know, what is the, you know, whenever we do an experiment, you know, people always come up with a question, what is the surety and how you're sure your data is accurate? Okay, then we say plus or minus 3.5. You know, this is the range actually for the, you know, our data to be very accurate. So those things, you know, in biological experiments, sometimes people come up in reviewers come up with a question and ask you, you know, is this actually the entire experiment is very true? They'll ask you. So we say, of course, there is an error, there is a standard error, this is the standard error, and then we say a number, and if the error is there, it is maintained uniform throughout the experiment. So things like that. So the standard deviation is a measure that summarizes the amount by which every value within data set varies from the mean. Of course, another thing which you also use very well nowadays is odds ratio. Okay, in biological terms, actually, in the clinical setting, things like that. So we'll go to the next slide, actually. Okay, so coming to this, your insurance sector, many people now will be aware of that. If you're in the middle of your age group, maybe after 30, 40, if you're there, you'll be aware of that, actually. Insurance and financial industries. So how the statistics plays a very important role. Remember, you know, for example, I'm telling you, there are two persons, A and B. One person is in a, one state. Another person is another in another state. Both will be having, you know, similar health insurance or life insurance, and then both will be of the same age group, things like that. But one will be having one medical condition, another will be having another medical condition. So how the insurance companies come, you know, and converge on a premium amount for that person? All those things, they take the statistical data. They take the statistical data from the people who have been suffering from diabetes, hypertension, or any other malignancies, actually, any other pathological conditions and malignancies. Then they make an average statistical out of that, you know, and then if this person is having diabetic for 10 years or 5 years, his premium is like that. If it is diabetic for 20 years, his premium is like that. If he's having a family predisposition to any particular disease, his premium is like that. So health insurance and life insurance companies make a lot of things, actually. So whenever we purchase any health insurance and life insurance, it is our duty to go into the terms and conditions to see how they react, or, you know, how they do. Those things are very important. Of course, insurance is a sector that is only now currently beginning to blossom in India, actually. But if you go to the developed countries, health insurance, life insurance, how they calculate the premiums and the premium coverage, very important in that regard, actually. Next is the vehicle insurance. So first party, second party, third party insurance. See here, if you're living in the United States, if you live in one county, for a particular model car that is in you purchase in a particular year, you will be paying less insurance. But if you are living another 100 meters away from that place, you go to the next county, there you'll be paying more for the same car you are having for the same year. It is all because the statistics, they take into account the crime in that area, they take into account the accident rate in that area, they take into account the stolen vehicles in that area, and then they calculate the insurance depending upon that. first party insurance, second party insurance, third party insurance, how they insure you, how they insure your vehicle, and how they insure the opposite vehicle that may come and hit you. If you live in a very rich state in the US, most will be having BMW, Mercedes Benz, Lexus, like that. So you'll be paying more insurance. But if you live in a poor state, the chance you hit a very rich vehicle, very high luxury vehicle, it is very, very less. So they calculate the premium. We may not be seeing that actually, but every day we see that statistics actually. That is how the insurance companies come to the premium coverage, the duration they calculate, how they charge actually. Of course, they will give you gimmick. We are giving a less sum of premium when compared to the previous and things like that. But whatever it may be, they do their own lessons actually. By statisticians, they work down and do that. Same is also the property insurance. We are not doing much type of insurance here, but in developed countries they do fire insurance, water insurance. There is another insurance by the name umbrella insurance. It is for insurance for all the insurances. It may sound funny actually. This when you buy the umbrella insurance, you're buying insurance for water, your water, damage from water, damage from fire, damage from theft, everything like that. Not to make sure all the insurances are being properly doing their job, you get an umbrella insurance. So this is the problem. But in a developed country, things like that. But we are now slowly getting exposed to that. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 years down the line, we also will be buying insurances. We'll be taking proud in our insurances, how safer we are, things like that. The next is disability adjusted life years, a very, very important thing that is slowly catching up in India. So let's say you're working in a company, you're exposing yourself to any risk actually. You suffer from the risk, and then that means, and then when the court decides that you're no longer eligible to work in that place actually, you have to be paid some money for the next 10 years or 20 years, depending upon how legally you move, and how the legal and your insurance company decides how much he could potentially earn in the next 10 or 20 years. So this is how they give some money depending upon the disability adjusted life years. So when you're working as a postdoc in the US, if you're working with benzene, or if you're working with any of the harmful chemicals, you have to be paid more. If you are a US citizen, it will be strictly followed. If you are an outsider, it may or may not be strictly followed. But there are some other things that the insurance companies will look into that. So there are many other, we call by the name occupational hazards. So, and that comes under the disability adjusted life years. We'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, and then loans and interest rates, of course, how much interest rates we pay to the loans actually, how much the interest the banks charges such as, they are all decided by the central banks in India. For us, we have the RBI. Some countries have multiple central banks actually. So the RBI makes sure that correct liquidity is there. Liquidity means money in the system. So, RBI will have a primary credit. It is just like, a chain. The RBI lends money to the smaller banks. The smaller banks get the money, and then in turn give in another loan to this even more smaller banks, and from that you get. So it is just like, water flowing from the higher dam to the lowest part actually. So this is how the liquidity flows, and this is being controlled and checked and regulated by the regulatory agencies. So if you look at the housing bubble in the US, or if you look at the global economic catastrophe in 2008, primarily it is because it is not been properly regulated. But in a country like India, which was very tightly regulated by the RBI in 2008, that economic crisis did not hit India. So it is because we did the homework, our statisticians did the homework, and then we fixed the primary credit rate and the secondary credit rate we call reverse repo rate. There is another thing called as reverse repo rate. So when the bank has the money, it cannot lend 100 rupees if it has in its pocket. It can only lend, to the best of my knowledge, like 94 or 95 rupees only. 5 rupees it has to keep as reserve actually, cash reserve ratio. And then there are primary credit rates, secondary credit rates, things are there actually. They all will be calculated depending upon the inflation. Inflation means, year over year, the increase in prices actually, that is the inflation, deflation, that it depends upon, they all do the statistical things and come up with an idea. So this is how it is been affecting us daily. So what are the things we are going to do? Statistics is going to come into play. we don't feel that actually. That is a real problem. It is every day we are feeling that actually. Then comes the taxes. Every year tax rates and slabs are changed by the finance ministry depending upon the GDP growth projections rate, and then inflation. So we make the GDP, gross domestic production growth. Okay, so depending upon the growth or reduction, we come up the idea actually. We are either going to see that, how it is going to play a part. So those regulatory agencies will make sure how, what we are going to charge, in the next year, what will be the tax slab, what will be the tax rate actually. All those things we do that by looking at statistical things only, how the economy is doing. So two things are very, very important. First is the growth of the economy or the strength of the economy. That is very, very important. Second is the health of the economy. So growth of the economy is one thing, health of the economy is one thing. Both has to go hand in hand. If it doesn't grow, if it doesn't go the same way, it is going to affect our people actually. They will not be, their purchasing power will be reduced, things like that. Okay, so we go to the next slide actually. Okay, so we'll go in detail with that, statistics in economy. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is how we have actually GDP growth rate of India actually. It has been tabulated. You may see it is very simple, but it is not actually simple. You have to calculate the gross domestic production, GDP, in every field that is in India. There is a big problem in India. Earlier, we did not calculate all the fields actually. We let some sectors actually. Services sectors be neglected, and there are some, unrecognized sectors in India, like, small peddlers, things like that. They all don't come into the play actually. So this is the reason why central government came up with an idea of GST and other things actually. They are all structural reforms they do actually to have the real idea about your GDP. So every year they change the GDP base years. Of course, when they change the base years, your economy looks bigger. When they don't change, your economic of course, earlier they used GDP, now they use another term, GDA. So the idea is very, very simple. In a country with a younger demography, our GDP is highly increasing. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so GDP per capita, you can see how, our country has progressed. So during the Mughal year, when the Mughals were in India, actually, you can see the GDP per capita was the same. And when the East India Company was there, it is the same. And then when the Britishers, after, they came, it is the same. But you look at the blue line, you can see when the Britishers came to India, their GDP per capita income increased actually. No wonder Britain called India as the jewel in its crown. So Britain, you can see how they were taking money from India. Of course, I'm not talking any of the rubbish things, but just to be scientifically clear, so this is how GDP per capita income is calculated. So you see there is a flat curve in GDP per capita income in India. So the wealth was taken from India to the Europe actually. So that is the reason why Europe's GDP per capita income is increasing, kept on increasing, whereas India's flat curve, instead of rising up, it actually is a horizontal line. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so now we see share of world's GDP, how countries fare up actually. So if you look at the history of the world, actually, you can see from the first century, we are having this slide actually. Whenever China has risen, India has risen. So this is the simple idea behind that. So you can see there is a yellow line and the red line. And as you come down to 2000, you can see in between, like, you can see 18th century after 19th century, their share of the world's GDP start reducing, and then the share of the Western Europe and the USA's GDP share start increasing. But currently, if you see in 2020, let's say 2019-20, India now has a share of around, let's say 3% of the world's GDP. So this, to say one small thing, whenever China has risen, India has risen. Whenever China has fallen, India has fallen. Because we as an Asian country, we rise up together, we fall together. And if you look at the Europe countries, they rise up together or they fall together. So when you look at the advantage of Europe and Asia is that they are together, So they are now in a big growing region, but slowly and steadily, when you look at the larger graph after 2008, you can see in the 2008, you can see the red line picking up, that is China picking up. And now by 2020, India is currently now a $3 trillion economy. Slowly it is also picking up. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the growth rates, GDP growth rates of India and China. So you can see slowly, because of the Chinese have started early. They started early under Deng Xiaoping, like 30, 40 years before, free market economy. They were rising actually. At that time, India was sleeping. Now India has also started to run. You can see slowly the green curve increasing more than the red curve. Of course, before the COVID problem, India was the fastest growing, biggest democracy in the world. So 3 days before, India's external affairs minister made a candid announcement actually, whether you like it or not, within, sooner or later, India will be the third largest economy in the world. First is the US, next is the China, and third will be India, maybe in the next 8 to 10 years down the line. So all those things, they are all calculated by statistics. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, you can see how, the projection in 2015. So by 2050, there is a two calculation rate. We have GDP per capita income, PPP, and then another one, nominal GDP, purchasing power parity. This is one calculation. Next is nominal GDP. So you can see in the purchasing power parity, China and India are expected to do well by 2015. Of course, they are actually climbing up the curve slowly. We'll go to the next slide, sir. Okay, so we'll go this slide. So this is how the GDP per capita of India in 1990 you can see, in 2010 you can see it is slowly starting to picking up actually. Of course, there could be many counter climbs like that, but whatever it may be, our GDP per capita income is slowly or steadily it is also increasing. So you can see India's actually GDP per capita income is very less when compared to even China, which is doing very well. But in the next 20, 30 years down the line, when the population is checked and when some competition resources we'll also be doing the same in the line. We'll go to the next slide, sir. Okay, so now how the stock markets are doing. Of course, very, very important. People think, why the stock markets are there, only people who gamble have to go to the stock markets. It's nothing like that. Because your stock markets are very, very important. They determine the health of your economy. They also determine your future lifestyle. That is very, very important. Only when your stock market is doing well, people will invest more into your country. Only when there is more investment coming, then only we'll get more jobs. More jobs means more money. Of course, your standard of life is going to increase. Of course, there is a sour grape. Not all will get that actually. But the idea is very, very simple. So credit rating agencies are there. They give their own credit ratings. So the stock market indexes is very, very important. Of course, it is an older thing actually. It was by the Bloomberg. So they calculate two things actually: face value index and market cap index. So here is a market cap index actually, the volume, number of shares released, and then the face value of each share multiplied by that, the volume of shares actually. So this is how the stock markets function actually. So you can see US is actually a leading market actually. Of course, India was like only 2.88%. Maybe I think this slide was like 5-6 years before. Now I think slowly our Sensex has crossed the green zone. We say green means it is up, red means it is down. So it is actually going on the green zone actually. So it is increasing a lot. Go to the next slide, sir. Okay, so coming to the returns, currently you see the gold prices have skyrocketed actually. So how, if you invested in gold 10 years before or 3 years before, how much money you'll be getting back actually. So whenever, just keep that in mind. We'll go to a little bit history. Whenever there is a instability, political instability, or whenever there is any proper government, things like that, people's money, paper money or any other bargaining money, they lost its value actually. And people will invest in jewels, people will invest in gold, metals, precious stones, things like that. It is because, the instability. Now you see with the COVID-19 thing coming up, most of the economies are being, it is being handicapped. It is actually not growing. So what they do is people tend to park their money more in precious metals. So this is how you see gold is now climbing up. I'm very sure it is going to even more climb up. But whatever it may be, when the mayhem is over, when the stock markets are doing well, and when the economy is moving out, you can see slowly it is going to climb down actually, and you can see paper money or digital transaction increasing in value. We'll go to the next slide, sir. Okay, you can see how the Sensex has performed actually. Currently, just to show, see here, in January, May 2008 to January 2009, you can see there is a big crash actually when the global markets crashed actually. But when the global markets crashed, India was the country that was very immune to that actually. It immediately came up out of that. Multiple factors are there. But of course, this is the problem with, when you are having a free market economy, when you're having investor confidence, when the money, foreign money is going to come into India. But whatever it may be, my understanding is in the next 10, 20 years, more money will come to India because of the young population who are willing to work and things like that. Next slide, please. Okay, now come to the another very, very important thing, statistics in health and medicine. In a country like India, of course, it is going to age in the next 20 years down the line. It is going to age. Currently, it is not aging. It is a young population. We are not investing much in medical field, but there is an eye-opening because of the COVID-19. Now, slowly, governments are starting to spend more in health infrastructure as well. So coming to this thing, application of statistics in medicine and health falls under epidemiology, public health, forensic medicine, and clinical research. So four basic broad categories you find the medical statistics being applied. We'll go to the next slide, sir. So some of the common statistical parameters used in the medical field are incidence rate, transmission rate, all related to the viral epidemic or the pandemic we call now that is sweeping the world actually. The mortality rate, incubation period, survival rate, odds ratio, and confidence interval. So how much incidence these viral diseases are in various countries, how many people are recovering, what is the transmission rate, every day how many new cases are being added up, what is the incubation period, like 14 days, how they have to stay inside, stay isolated, how they get it. All those things are very, very important in this thing. In a country like India, which is more immune because of the high temperature fluctuations we have in this country, the tropical climate, we are exposed to more germs, we are exposed to more new viral diseases, things like that. Because of that, we are, our death rate from COVID is relatively lesser when compared to other things like that. If it in the US, actually, if you see the countries in the colder regions, there is not much difference or range of temperature. So they are not exposed to different antigenic things like that. Because of that, a small infection will be just like a forest fire. It will catch everywhere like that. But we are more immune to that. Not only that, our, we say our MHC, major histocompatibility complex in human beings, is called as HLA. Biology people will know. That is much more stronger, more immune, because India is a melting pot of races, things like that. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so how the governments are spending, per capita spend in various countries actually is an early in 2008. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so out-of-pocket healthcare expenses, how it is happening. In our country, we don't depend upon the government for safety. Most of the people, they spend, more actually, nearly 50% is coming out of their pocket for their healthcare actually. So, we look at the Netherlands, France, developed countries in the world, the government is paying more. That is a problem with the developed countries actually. They don't have much money in their coffers. Whereas in a country like India, which is spending lesser actually, in the next 5 to 10 years down the line, more money will be in the coffers because we are not shelling, as the population is also not older. we won't be shelling too much actually. They are all some of the statistical things you can see. Next slide, sir. Okay, so just to have a simple idea, how many people are there, just a small statistical, how many doctors, dental surgeons are there, Ayush practitioners are there, midwives are there, allopathic docs in hospitals, public hospitals actually. They are all registered doctors actually, but of course there are other people as well. Now, of course, because of that, this pandemic has given a wake-up call actually to India to increase the number of doctors, medical practitioners, things like that, and that will help us in a long way in the future. Next slide, sir. Okay, so number of hospitals, in India, in the urban and rural areas, you can see rural areas much neglected. You can see the dispensaries, hospitals, things like. We'll go to the next slide, sir. You may be wondering why these things matters actually. Very, very important. When the government makes a policy decision in the healthcare sector, when they have to allot the money they require, the projection, how they are going to allot the money in the future, especially 5 or 10 years down the line, all those things will be determined only by the statistical data that has been collected from the ground. So ground level statistic work is very, very important in this regard. You can see medical, dental, dental MDs, nursing, pharmacy, and how the seats actually. So the government everywhere nowadays actually creating more medical colleges. They're going to almost have sanctioned things like that, doing in the positive thing. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, sir. Okay, so how the states spend on their percentage of GDP spending on their health actually. You see Delhi, the capital city, of course, more affluent city, more luxurious city in India actually. Standard of living in Delhi relatively higher when compared to other places. You can see they spend more, whereas other states you can see very lesser actually. So the average is around 4.9 to 5 actually. Of course, this may not be true now currently. This was the statistical data some 2 years before, things like that. Next slide, sir. But whatever it may be, the average percentage of the GDP we spend on the health is actually around 4.9 or 5%, things like that. So this is the thing actually. The all states average is around 4.9. So you can see the range actually. Some states spending even 3.9, some states spending like 11.1. You can see the range actually, the difference. So the quality of life changes depending upon the amount of money or the percentage of GDP we spend on the healthcare, things like that. Next slide, sir. Okay, so coming to the medical thing, actually, adult prevalence of HIV in India. So incidence rate. This is one of the examples for that. Next slide, sir. So just I put this slide to tell you one thing actually. In a country like India, pathological diseases like cancer is not a big killer actually. Even I would say, viral disease like HIV is also not a big killer. But other infections are actually accounting for too much actually. So, now we are treating HIV better, of course. We can keep the T cell count actually. And then if you prevent it from going down, you can always maintain it. You can always manage it actually. So, but, especially cancers, things like that, they are not a killer in India actually. So Kaplan-Meier plot of progression-free survival and overall survival with gemcitabine, epirubicin, and paclitaxel triple therapy. So this tells you, after the treatment with drugs, how many months they are living free of cancer, or how many months they're able to, they are live free without death, how they are able to cheat death with these cancer therapeutic drugs. The efficacy, the efficiency, all those things we can calculate. It is very, very important. You may wonder why it is here actually, very, very important. So when a drug goes to the clinical trials, like 1, 2, 3, whatever the phases they go actually, finally, if they don't increase their Kaplan-Meier plot of disease-free progression or survival, things like that, it's useless. So following up of the patients, very, very important. So this plays a very, very important role. So it is also a statistical things only. Next slide, please. Okay, coming to the social status, health and wellness of a population, measure of the standard of living of a country. social discrepancies in a community, threats, challenges, opportunities, help in policy decisions and management. So very, very important. So how the every governments tune their policy, how they create, how they calculate, it is all important in that regard actually. So we have to pay more attention to those things actually. We'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the infant mortality rate in India actually. So you can see the infant mortality rate is climbing down. You can see there is a downward. It is a negative slope. You can see earlier there were many people dying because of the increase in healthcare facilities, things like that. Now it has been on the downward trend. So it is very, very important in that regard actually. So of course not everything happens in this country is green, but look at the healthcare sector. It is surely improved when compared to 10 or 20 or 30 years before. Next slide, please. Okay, maternal mortality ratio. Of course, you can see some of the states actually. We'll go to the next slide. Earlier, maternally, many people die actually. Now it is not happening in India. Of course, prevalence of diagnosed and undiagnosed diabetes in US population by age group. So you can see this. I picked up this slide just to tell you the US population is aging. It is a statistical truth actually. So when the population is aging, you tend to have these type of things actually. This will be a very headache problem for India in the next 20 or 30 years actually. So there will be a big market for healthcare medical field after 20 or 30 years in India, because 90% of the population will be aged statistically. So now it is very younger. You don't feel diabetes drugs marketed that much actually, hypertensive drugs marketed like that. Now, so in the future, 10, 20 years down the line or 30 years down the line, India will be a very big market for the medical products, medical kits and drugs like that, because bulk of the population will be aging by 2050. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the birth weight, actually, you can see the difference between, during a period 1998 to 99, 98 to 99, and 2005 to 2006. So every year, at least 6 million children in India are born with low birth weight, which gives them a disadvantage start in life. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. How the smoking and this is the heart disease relationship association, odds ratio, you can call. We can do many things actually. The same the thing actually, of course, a little bit to show the social statistics actually we're using. Substance use and abuse among unmarried low-income women in a state actually in Australia. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, now come very important thing, status in business opportunities. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so in business performance and opportunities in IT industry growth trajectory. So you can see, let's say if a company wants to invest, let's say Bill Gates wants to invest like $10 billion in India, how will you look at? You look at the statistics actually. Or every, like Apple, if it wants to invest, Macintosh want to, or any Intel, any company, any IT company, if it wants to pump money into the IT sector, they look at the growth trajectory and then they'll make an assessment. Okay, next 10 years down the line, this field is going to increase statistically. So if we invest in that particular field, we'll get a huge return. Depending upon that, they will make the investment. So you can see, we may think it is not affecting us. Statistics is always there actually. They'll do the research actually, market research. They'll come to the understanding, and then they'll do, okay, 5-10 years down the line, where we are going to be, where our money is going to be. They'll park the money only where it is actually suitable for them. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so growth in deposit over the years. Okay, for the past years actually, now the RBI, which is now having a little bit more cash when compared to like 20 years before, like, so we are having, our countries having relatively more cash because of the deposits, things like that. We'll go to the next slide. Very, very important thing in India. This is the most rosy thing about India actually, currently, at least for the next 20 years down the line. Very, very statistically important thing. Now, when you look at the thing actually, so the bulk of the population, you can see, it is around less than 35, things like that. So around, you can see there is a you look at carefully in the last, 4 horizontal lines, it is approximately around, huge population actually. So bulk of the India's population is young currently. This is India's strength actually. This will lead to more people, more transaction, more people working and contribute to the government coffers. So the government will get richer. Whether we get richer, it is another different story actually. But after 20, 30 years down the line, the government will be forced to give us back. That's it. So this is the rosy thing about India currently actually. Why people are so excited about India. So this is the statistics behind that. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, you can see the COVID-19 death rates in US by age. So this is the problem, whether US is willing to speak or Europe is willing to speak. Bulk of the US population is aged. In after 1950, there is a baby boomer generation in the US actually. Many babies are born, now they are very older. They are about 65 or 70. This is the problem with the US actually. Now they want money from the government. Earlier they contributed to the government. Now they want money from the government. So you can see COVID-19 death rates in the US by age. So you can see that's a very big thing. 85 plus people contributing around 10.4%. So you can see the older populations than the US actually. So the population is an older population. That is a problem with the United States. It is having its hand full. It will come to us, the same problem will come to us after 20, 30 years, like maybe by 2040 or 2050. So like another 20 years to 25 years, India is having a golden period actually. It is going to have. This is the time where this country will grow. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, statistical and environmental studies and energy. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so you can see, how statistically we are predicted. I mean, there is a thing that how it is being there in 18th century. We may not have done much statistics. Of course, with the limited things, actually, you can see how it is getting warmer. The blue means it is colder, and red is actually it is getting warmer. The planet is getting hotter because of huge population, because of too much use of environmental pollutants, and many other factors actually. Of course, it is a cycle. It will happen. Next slide, please. You can see the sea level from the satellite data actually. So the sea level has been slowly increasing because of the polar ice caps are melting actually. So every year you can see 3.3 millimeters, the sea level is increasing. Of course, this is actually a bad thing to many countries in the world, especially countries that are below the mean sea level. Fortunately, some countries have suffered, whereas some countries have not suffered that much actually. But of course, they are doing all they can to overcome this problem. Next slide, please. Okay, statistics in climate prediction, predicting temperature, rainfall. Of course, meteorological department tells tomorrow it is going to rain. There is 40% chance it will rain. How they come up? They get the previous data, they do the statistics actually, they create a model. From that model, they tell in the future this is going to happen. 75% chance it is going to be on that zone. You can't be 100% right. So this is how statistically it is being predicted. You predict the temperature. How will you click the Yahoo or you click anywhere, they'll tell tomorrow in your place, the next week in your place, the temperature will be like this thing. The precipitation will be like this. All those, it is the statistics coming into play. Humidity, natural disaster predictions down from satellite data, very, very important currently in the world actually. Tsunami warning systems, wind speed, wind chill, they're all very, very important. If you look at the European countries, it's not the cold that is a real problem. It is the wind speed and wind chill that will actually kill you. It's just like, it may not be that much cold, but it will be just like someone poking you with a sharp needle if you have the wind speed and higher wind chill. So they will determine how cold you are going to feel actually. Next slide, please. Okay, carbon dioxide emissions by countries. Various countries around the world, you can see the carbon dioxide emissions. Whatever the developed countries can cry, they are the biggest culprits. They are doing out more carbon dioxide emissions, and they'll cry, we have to protect the environment. Of course, that is the way life happens. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the percentage of species in several groups are listed as, endangered, vulnerable, rare. Okay, so the various categories, we are losing many different species. Of course, it is a trend. Earlier, there were many species. There is no industrial developments in some parts of the tropical regions. The more the development is going to come to the tropical regions, we are going to lose many different new species actually. The next slide, please. Okay, the primary energy consumption, you can see the 2017 data, how much we are using actually, you can see very disappointing, only 0.7% solar actually. See, if you ask me, personally ask me, what is India's biggest strength? Two things I'll tell. One is its young population currently, at least for the next 20 to 30 years, statistically important. Next is very, very statistically important. It is going to be forever. We have plenty of sunshine. Like wasting water, like wasting oil. We are wasting sunlight actually. You go to the countries that are closer to the polar regions, they don't receive sunlight actually. So developed countries have not invested in that technology. They cannot do that. They don't receive sunlight. We receive copious things actually. It is actually being wasted. It is just like water going into the sea. We are wasting the solar thing actually, which is a very, very important. So this renewable thing is a very, very important thing. You can see that how the percentage we use. So once the fossil fuel is going to go down, the fossil fuel price is going to increase. This Asian countries will escape by going into the renewable. I mean, these renewable things actually, like solar things like that. Of course, they can manage a little bit with that actually when the fuel prices actually. Next slide, please. Okay, so global new investment in clean energy. Every day you can see, in the one of the important scientific thing is the clean energy. So the solar, how much it, the investment is being made. Wind. You might have heard about a company by the name Tesla, TESLA. So Tesla is a company that has been making so much. It is investing more into clean energy actually. So I mean, Tesla's founder is actually smart in that doing that actually, because energy smart technologies, let's leave biofuels, let's see other things actually, but solar, wind, or hydrothermal, or low carbon services, they'll be very, very important. I'll just highlight small thing. There is a thing called as carbon credit. In India, we have one thing. We have tax deduction and then tax rebate actually we say. So there is a very important thing called as carbon credit. If you buy a in developed countries, if you buy a car that is less polluting, they will charge you less tax. Only now we are getting that. Many companies are doing that actually. India as well. They will tell, we are planting like 1,000 trees in our factory, so that you have to give us tax rebate, or taxes should be reduced. So they are some of the things the government is going to call. The government is going to take a shot in that actually and tell, and these people will tell, we are investing this much into green energy, so give us carbon credit. We are cutting down carbon emission. Because of that, you have to give us some tax rebate. So there are some of the things actually. It may be sound funny to us actually, but big companies, they don't pay taxes because of this thing actually. Investment in clean or green energy. We are not familiar with that actually. Of course, 5-10 years down the line, this will be the biggest topic we'll have actually in our day-to-day life. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'll finish quickly in few minutes. Okay, in politics, very, very important now in a country like India, very important how they make projections. They are now calling off elections. I was surprised in the last election, they called off election. It's not easy. I don't know how much you understand. Only when the final votes are counted, you will come up with an idea that it is not like happening now. When the 50 to 60% elections are being votes are being counted, they'll have the mathematical model projecting this much seats they'll get actually, or this much will happen. They'll call off election. So it's very common in a country like US and all. They'll call off election within 1 or 2 years of 1 or 2 hours of counting. They'll call off elections actually. It is a statistical model. You may wonder, right? It has been statistically done. They had a model previously how it happened when the counting is happening this much. If it is incumbent or new government, all those things, they'll do the calculation and come up with a model actually. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so high voter turnout, how it is there, depending upon that, depending upon the demography of the place, they'll, the success rate of different political parties, how it is going to go. You may wonder why this is benefit, this is affecting us. This is actually affecting us every day. We are not realizing that actually. So depending upon only your investment will come, which party is going to come and how they are going to play in the economic field or in the FDI, how they are going to do. All those things are very, very important. So they'll make a statistical assessment, analysis, things like that. And then only whatever happens, money is going to revolve around these things because of the statistical tools or the statistical data tools they have or the models they use actually. Next slide, please. Okay, now you see, it's a very important thing, how the coronavirus changed politicians' approval ratings. You may wonder why this is affecting us. It is going to affect us. You will not understand. Because, countries will give you, international agencies will give credit ratings depending upon the stability of your government, depending upon the stability of the leadership actually. Of course, it is not always black and white. It is going to be tweaked here and there. But more or less, actually, you can see some people doing well, some people not so doing well. This will not happen or this will not be there actually trend. But on a particular time, on a particular date, they did like this thing. It may or may not be true. But this is how the world functions, how the statistical things are happening, how they are doing actually, how they look at, which country is going to progress more, how much investment it should come in, how many, how much money we can earn when we invest in a market, or how much money we will lose actually. All those things play a very, very important role. We are, not knowing that it is affecting our daily day-to-day life actually. Next slide, please. Okay, so populations, you can see after a long time, after nearly, you can see, very, very significant slide. You can see after nearly 2000 years, you can see now the population is exploding. So we are living in a very crucial phase in human history. I don't know how much you are able to fathom it. This is the idea behind it actually. Currently, the globe's population is too much. That's the reason for the many problems that is happening around the world actually, because of the population explosion. If you don't check it, it's going to get even worse. The next slide, please. Okay, I'll finish in 5 minutes, few minutes. The statistical in operations and research, of course, the neural networking, Google Glass, driverless car, or like pilotless aircrafts, radars like that. You can see more satellites coming into play, more artificial intelligence technology being coming into play. So we are, it also got its own statistical thing. So artificial intelligence means you use more statistical tools to create models, and then you make the computer learn by itself. The computer learns and performs some task. Other computers are, just like a dumb machine. You give instruction, it functions. But you are making the computer learn like a small kid by giving some data sets, statistical data sets, things like that. Okay, there is a thing called as back propagation that helps him to learn and then come up with their own strategy. Driverless car, driverless vehicles. So 10 years before, when I was in the Southeast Asia, I suddenly felt, there was no driver in the train. I was actually surprised actually 10, 12 years before when I was in the Southeast Asia. I was very surprised. I have not seen that in the US as well, but I've seen that in Southeast Asia, how they use the artificial technology, things like that. Okay, next slide, please. So this is how very, very important. Bioinformatic industry is a very big money spinner actually nowadays actually with the IT industry. A lot of people don't realize that IT means they think, working with the computers or working with a back end, front end jobs like, like BPO, business process outsourcing, things like that. Those things, but it is not that actually. A lot of things actually the computers we use actually for data mining, very, very important thing actually. KPO, BPO, knowledge process outsourcing, all those things. You can see, statistical tools, especially algorithm, mathematical models are being used actually, where the statistics play a very, very key and important role in all fields of human sphere actually. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to have an idea about how these things are happening. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you eat, if you sleep, Stats keep on repeating. Everyday life, you find statistics always there. We don't feel the specialty of air because air is all around us. It has been there for generations. We don't feel the importance of that. When we are bottled up in a small area, you feel the importance of air. Similarly is there. Statistics is everywhere actually. Right from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, even during sleep, statistics is there actually. It is playing a very, very important role. You know, your everyday life, statistically they capture it, and it has been manipulated or it has been used. Your data, things like that, has been used actually in many ways actually. So I think I've conveyed a little bit about how the statistical plays a role actually. So I just want to have this a basic thing because I understand most of them come from different background actually. So just have a basic idea about how statistics play a role, things like that. So I don't go deeply into any aspect actually. Okay, so I'll be happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Pravin, for giving such a wonderful lecture. It was really informative. And from the very beginning, from the very basic, you started and you described that how this statistics has made its place in almost every field of research. And I myself, I'm in research in microbiology, and from you have talked about the GDP. We talk about the rate of growth of microbes. Even though the growth of microbes measuring is not possible without statistics. So this statistics is I have many times I've heard people talking specific cases about few things, and they don't talk about stats. If somebody has got his son has got the employment, they think that now employment is rising. They don't talk about the status. What is the actual statistics? So, hearing your talk, you can see that it is actually the stats which matter. It is not just one or two cases or one or two things in like. Now, there are a few questions which I have received from the participants. I would like to share with you. Uh,
Sure, sir.
One of the participants has asked, is there some softwares which you can suggest which can be used for the statistical analysis for the research? So, can you suggest some softwares to our participants, please?
For the I mean,
Yes,
for the
biology.
for the
They
biological
mostly are
research.
from life science.
Okay, so sir, actually, of course, we can do many things actually. SAS, SPSS, that's the most commonly thing which I had known or exposed to actually. Um, some of the things actually I prefer to do manually. I don't know because I'm an old person. Actually, I do it. I prefer to do it manually actually. But let me put one small things actually, sir. Now there are many open source softwares being available actually. So when I was a postdoc, I have to learn Unix to do computing, especially with sequencing data. Unfortunately, I'm not a computer person actually, so I couldn't do. So I was like stagnating for 6 months actually. But later, by the end of the 6 months, I managed to get one analyzer, which is very user friendly, just like how we operate a Word actually. So I personally believe, currently, I don't know, I'm not currently into statistics actually. I personally believe more of the stats actually or statistical tools, analysis tools are now becoming more user friendly, and it will get even more user friendly so that even a lay person can go and do analysis actually. Of course, for us, for a biological thing, mostly like a correlation, regression, confidence interval, test of significance, test of best fit. If in a cancer biologist like us, like Kaplan-Meier plot or an odds ratio, this can be done by odd statistics. I mean, common statistical tools like SAS, SPS, things like that. So currently, I don't know what is and depending upon the requirement as well. So if you're, let's say, if you're doing statistical tools, that varies actually. And now, if you go to the open source platforms, actually, many are now available free of actually free. You can use that actually.
Dr. Pravin, there is one participant, Miss
The next
Kazmi
question,
Das, and he has asked that if you could please elaborate more on the machine application of statistics in machine learning. Application of statistics in machine learning. So, very briefly, if you can just
sure.
tell about it. Yes. Hello. And there is one more question from the participant that can you tell about something about parametric or non-parametric tests? Parametric and non-parametric tests in statistics. Am I audible to you? Hello, Dr. Raji?
Yeah, Sanjay, you are audible. I think the
Some connection
audio
issue.
from Dr. Pravin is.
I think
Yeah. We'll wait for
we
that.
are facing this technical issue, so we need to wait. Dr. Pravin, can you hear me? Am I audible to you?
Or we can do one thing. We can write to Dr. Pravin
Yes.
once he's available. We can write these questions to him, and we can answer back to the Gajari Das and Deepthi Raut. There are just two questions which are left. I think there are no more doubts which have come up. So with that, I should announce the closure of this second technical session. Dr. Sanjay, thank you for effectively moderating this second technical session. Your presence was highly appreciated. Now I'll just announce that we will be meeting tomorrow.
Excuse me, Dr. Rajiv.
Yes, Shreya, please.
Dr. Pravin has posted some message in chat box.
Yes. Good class driving has got.
Yeah, the answers are available in the chat box. Dr. Pravin has answered both the questions. I think Prabita Mishra.
Okay, yeah. He has answered.
Yes, she enjoyed.
Yes.